Well, welcome all you wiretappers back here in the studio of Gangland Wire. We have Ron Chepesiuk here. Ron has been on the show a few times before. The last time Ron was on, it was about his book Bad Henry, which was not really about the mob or any narcotics cartels, but it was about a really bad dude. I had several comments on that show about what a bad guy he was. So anyhow, welcome, Ron. I appreciate you coming back on the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Gary. I appreciate the being here.
Okay, so Ron, we talked before, and you are participating. You were the screenwriter for a series on VIX, VIX channel.
Yeah, it's a Mexican streaming service channel. It's the biggest Spanish language streaming service channel in the world.
Oh, really? I don't know. I tried to look. I tried to look for it.
It's available in the United States as well. I get it on my cable.
Okay, so
yeah, I get it on my cable.
It's on cable. You don't know if it's on like an app. They don't have their own app that you can get. You have to have cable.
Yeah, they have their own app.
Oh, do they? Okay. Well, I'll have to try
their own app.
Try to download that app. Anyhow, you did the screenplay for this story of Carlos Lehder. Carlos Lehder was he was one of the early huge cocaine cartel members connected to Pablo Escobar. He was, I don't know, did he have his own organization? He handled transport, if I remember right. And got connected up with George Jung.
Transportation genius.
So
right, he was the transportation genius, and he was a member of the Medellin cartel, which was headed by Pablo Escobar, and included some other Colombian drug traffickers, including the Ochoa brothers.
So start off with a little bit about his history. Where did he come from? I mean, just a poor boy in Colombia that grew up to be a cartel leader and a transportation captain.
He was born in September 7, 1949 in Colombia. His father had emigrated from Germany to Colombia. So he was German Colombian. And his father was Wilhelm, was an interesting character. He helped build a lot of the early highways in Colombia, and built some apartment buildings that had elevators, which at the time was an unusual occurrence. He was a rabid German, and during the war, the U.S. kept tabs on him because they thought he might be a German spy for Hitler on that. And he married a former queen, Helena, and Carlos was one of four children, the third one in the group on that. And he sort of adapted a lot of his father's views on race and Jews and all that. He was a very anti-Semitic and racist, and he was sort of a problem child. But his parents divorced when they were 15 years old. His mother moved to the United States, where he got involved, dabbled in marijuana. He stole cars, and he eventually got caught and ended up spending time in Danbury, Connecticut prison there.
And that's, from what I read, that's where he met this man named George Jung.
Yeah, he met George Jung. George Jung became his cellmate. He was really interested in George Jung's past. He had been a marijuana smuggler, and he told Carlos that he had used planes to fly across the border from Mexico and smuggle in marijuana, and it was very effective. And Carlos, being a very smart guy, thought that transportation could be used to smuggle cocaine into the United States. He was a visionary, and he saw the potential for cocaine. This was in the mid-'70s, where cocaine was just starting to become big in the United States. and he was in prison with a lot of drug people, and he picked their brains. He kept notebooks, all that sort of stuff. He was like he went to school to study drug trafficking, and he collected all this information, and he made a deal with George Jung that when he got out of prison, when they both got out of prison, they would set up a drug smuggling operation, and that's what happened.
Now, is this the scenario that is in the movie Blow with, I believe, Johnny Depp played the
yeah. Of
George
course,
Jung character?
It's a movie. It's a movie, so it's large parts of it are fictional.
Right.
But Diego Delgado was the character of Carlos Lehder in the movie.
Okay.
I don't know why they didn't use his real name, but they didn't. They used his real name in this series that I'm associated with. It's called Paraíso Blanco, White Paradise in English. And but anyways, yeah. So it made Jung more famous than Lehder in that movie. And my thing was, I never thought Lehder got his due as a drug trafficker. The Narco series, you remember the Narco series?
Right.
That came out. Yeah, he was a character in that, but they really short shrifted him. They didn't really give him credit for his role in the Medellin cartel, and they got rid of him early in that series on that sort of thing. So this is really the first series that's going to look at his career and really give him his due in terms of his role in the drug trafficking history.
Well, they always have to take a lot of literary or poetic license in a fictional story. Were you able to keep it pretty close to the facts?
Exactly.
So now they were pretty ambitious. I mean, very ambitious. Even did he buy that island, a place called Norman Key, or how did that work?
Like I said, he was very visionary, and he saw the way drugs were being distributed on a very piecemeal basis. They hired couriers or mules, individuals that smuggled the dope into the United States on their bodies or in their suitcases or whatever. And he saw the potential for mass distribution of cocaine if he could use planes. Mm-hmm. And he discovered this island, Norman's Cay, which was about 210 miles off the coast of the United States. It was strategically located from Colombia, and he came up with the idea of using planes to move the dope into the United States. And at that time, there was no ISIS, there was no Al Qaeda or anything like that. Mm-hmm. So the safeguards were pretty lax in those days. And so what he did was he devised the system where these planes would fly from Colombia, stop in Norman's Cay, refuel, and continue their journey to the United States and fly into Georgia and Florida and South Carolina and fly on these remote airways. And then they would unload the drugs onto trucks and then move them around the country. And it was very effective. And soon Carlos cornered the market. Like they said at one time, 4 of every 5 kilos of cocaine that were shipped into the United States came through Carlos Lehder.
Wow. Now, how was he making his money? It was what was the breakdown, the table of organization, if you will, with Pablo Escobar and Carlos Lehder and the Ochoa brothers? How did that work? Did he was he an independent contractor that was setting up transportation and
he worked out a relationship. He worked out a relationship with the others. When they said the Medellin cartel, cartel is sort of a misnomer. It was actually a loosely associated group that worked with each other, for the benefit of everybody. Yeah. And they would share loads of cocaine. They would put their cocaine on these loads, and then they would be shipped to the United States via Carlos's distribution method. And then when they were sold in the United States, they would get their money back. from sales on that, and it worked pretty well. I mean, there was really no arguments between the major leaders of the Medellin cartel, and it worked for several years.
Interesting. Now, they would commingle loads. Would each organization have some kind of a distinctive stamp on their kilos? So when somebody picked up those kilos, they would know they were theirs, and they would know who they needed to pay.
Right. There were distinctive markings on the dope. One of the rumors was, and I think it's true, was that Lehder stamped his dope with the swastika.
Interesting.
And that sort of thing. And he really disliked the United States. He looked at cocaine as a powerful political weapon in which he wanted to destroy the United States. And he almost did. I mean, the cocaine crisis in the late 70s. I remember, I was a professor on campus, and I would hear all kinds of stories about these women that would sell their bodies for a snort of cocaine, and people, going to rehab and all kinds of things. And that was largely the result of Carlos Lehder and his transportation organization.
There's no doubt about it. I was a soldier in Ronnie Reagan's war on drugs during those years, and that when that crack cocaine hit the inner cities of our major cities, it just devastated them. They've never really come back today. I don't know. I mean, there's something about the marketing of it and the small $25 rocks and it was so plentiful. I know when I first started in that business, it was like 20,000, 25 grand for a kilo, and it was even less. I was like around 10 or 15,000 later on, and by the 90s, the price kept going down because supply and demand. The supply kept going up.
Right. Exactly on that. And it started off, $100,000 a kilo, and then it was going down to 25,000, 15,000 a kilo as the demand and quantity increased.
So what was his life like personally? I mean, did he have a wife and family, and a big, like a safe house, like Escobar had the big estancia and up in the mountains where he could hide out, or was he just always on the move? What was his personal life like? And
there's one word to describe it: debauched. Debauched. He was known for, on Norman's Cay, it became a one big wild party scene. He had these bodyguards who were German girls, and they would go pick up people that worked with Lehder from when they landed, naked, and he was known for his orgies. He had all kinds of orgies. It became really a wild scene, and he had little self-control. He spent wildly. He made billions. He was at one time, he was one of the rich. He's probably richer than Escobar at one time.
Really?
And he lived a wild, exciting, debauched life. And of course, there were rumors about him. There were rumors that he was bisexual. I heard a story from the prosecutor that put him in jail, that in prison about the mid-'80s, he got beat up really badly in prison because he put the make on a guy. So it was kind of interesting background on that sort of thing. And I don't think he ever married, but he had a lot of girlfriends, and he had children too. His girlfriend, Monica, later became really prominent in defending her father later on.
Interesting how he would engender that kind of loyalty among his children and live that lifestyle. He must have kept them pretty well separate from his daily lifestyle, his partying lifestyle.
Yeah, but he was very bizarre, very, very unpredictable, and he used his own product. He used a lot of cocaine, and I think that made him a little bit unstable, a little bit unpredictable, a little bit irrational. Which sort of ticked off Pablo Escobar, who's more about business than anything. And he always looked at Lehder as sort of an embarrassment, to the cartel. and his unpredictable behavior. But he kept him around because he was useful. He was a transportation genius, and he knew how to move drugs to the United States.
So what kind of an intelligence network did he have set up? Do you get into that in the show, or have you got into that? He must have had
Like how do you
DEA
mean?
agents on the payroll, or customs people.
Oh well, yeah, he had of course he had Colombian politicians galore set up. I mean, they couldn't pass an extradition treaty because he had the Medellin cartel. Not only him, but the Medellin cartel had such a stranglehold on the legislature, and he couldn't operate in Norman's Cay unless he bribed a lot of the politicians, including Pidling, who was the prime minister. He went all the way up to the prime minister, but he was able to maintain his presence there on Norman's Cay for like 4 years until the United States couldn't tolerate it anymore, and they put pressure on the Bahamian government, and they kicked Lehder out about 1982.
And I can remember those days in the 80s. The United States finally figured out that all this cocaine was coming up through the Bahamas and up through Florida. Yeah. And then you see these, I mean, they were like dirigibles or blimps floating out there. And they just really hardened the target, the coastline around Florida, and with other more radar and those blimp things and all that. So was he able to get around that, or did he have to was he able to move?
No, he used the airplanes to get in, and for a long time he was able to get away with that because the United States. The thing about law enforcement is that they're always behind the curve.
Yeah, that's true.
They're always behind the curve. They're always behind and that's what gives the criminals the advantage. But eventually they catch up. Eventually they catch up, and that's when the tide turns against the criminals on that sort of thing. But he had for a long time. He was able to use this network and to use his means of transportation to move drugs into the United States. And of course, later they got competition from the Cali cartel, which was a neighboring cartel from the city of Cali, named after the city of Cali. And then later the Mexicans got in, on that sort of thing. But for a time there, the Medellin cartel controlled about 80% of the drug trafficking coming into the United States.
Wow. So I'm always curious about, like, this guy had transportation, and how does he, in the United States, he's not native. How does he set up people in the United States? How does he get connected up and have people to meet those loads and have a warehouse, rented, or 2 or 3 of them rented and distributed out where it's not all in one place? And which I know they don't like to keep it all in one place once they get it to where they're going. Now, did he take personal, control of that, or did he have somebody else? How did that work?
The drug trafficking works like a big multinational. A drug trafficking organization. They got all kinds of people to operate for them, and they put people in place, to operate the stash houses, to launder the money, to move the cocaine the cocaine in Colombia, so that they can move it to the United States. But what people don't realize is that you have to be pretty organized and pretty smart to operate on the level of a kingpin, a drug kingpin. I did the book on Jesus, right?
Right.
Jesus Ruiz Anao. And he was the first $1 billion cocaine kingpin in Great Britain, and he had 20,000 estimated people working for him in Colombia, moving money. Moving money because they couldn't ship it to Colombia without alerting law enforcement if it was over 500 pounds.
Yeah.
They had to keep it under 500 pounds. And here in the United States, it's $10,000, and that. Yeah, but, they operated like multinationals, a big drug corporation. We're dealing with billions of dollars. The only difference between multinational and a drug trafficking organization on the level of Medellin cartel is that the Medellin cartel is illegal.
Yeah. So did they have enough English speaking Colombians that they trusted and they knew a lot about, that then came up to the United States and started making connections with cocaine dealers in
there
big
were plenty of
cities?
Colombians here that were able to work.
Okay.
That they were able to work with. Yeah, there's plenty of people to work with. They hired English speaking people, but they had a lot of Spanish speaking people because of the influx of migration.
Mm-hmm. So I always wondered then, I never could figure out then, how do these American drug organizations, how did they get connected to the Colombian drug organizations? Is there is there any particular way, or is it just people been in the prison together like Jung and Lehder, then get out and then contact each other?
No, it's various ways that they connect to each other on that sort of thing, but they're all interested in the same thing, making money, right?
Yeah, right.
And there is always a demand for drugs, right? Whether it's cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, whatever. And there's really no problem finding people that will work with you. They're willing to be peddle small drug pushers, bodyguards, all kinds of people. Money launderers.
Yeah.
And money talks. They have the money to pay these people.
So probably, I know how the United States, they almost have to set up in bulk, truckloads of getting cash back down in there. Did the planes then take big chunks of cash back down?
That's the hard part of drug trafficking.
Right.
It's not getting the drugs into the country and selling it; it's getting the money out of the country. Because money is bulky, all that sort of stuff.
Exactly.
And they became more sophisticated in the way they money laundered their money. But at one time they used planes that brought the drugs in. They used those planes to move the cash back to Colombia. Right. Where they, like I've been to Colombia several times, and you see all these buildings empty all over the place, just empty buildings, apartment buildings, beautiful buildings. That's drug money. They have to do something with their money, so they built stuff, but they didn't care anybody lived in it. They just wanted to hide their money.
Just have that real estate. Real estate's a pretty good investment. I know we mob guys here in the Kansas City that they start buying small apartment buildings or little strip malls and stuff, and then you got cash money coming back in the rest of your life, basically. From those.
Like, tell you a story. I've been to Colombia several times, and my wife's from there and all that. I'm thinking about starting a bar there, and we were in this bar, and it was unbelievable. It was so huge and so impractical the way it was built.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, I said, why would somebody build a place like this? I said, how can they make money? And I thought about it, and I said, a good example of money laundering.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't really have to be efficient with your money when you're just trying to get rid of it, get it into something that will give you some kind of income back. You don't have to be totally efficient with how you do it.
The main objective is to hide it.
Yeah. Turn it into something that gives you a legal stream back. That is the main objective.
Yeah.
So
the only problem is when you get caught, all that disappears. The government gets all that.
A little story about that. We had a pretty good sized cocaine dealer here in Kansas City, and he was big into this, and he would, buy up small kind of junky houses, and then he had a lot of independent contractors, and he would pay cash for the houses, pay cash to the contractors, fix them up, and then rent them out or maybe sell them. So he got ambitious, and he had them, all these different little contractors he'd made contacts with, build a small, like a 4 or 5 story office building. And when he went down, then the government, our financial investigations people, went into that building. They're going to seize that building. And they did get it titled back over to the government. But when they got into it, it was so out of code and so messed up that they just had to tear it down. In the end, it would have cost too much to fix it up. So they ended up with the land. Right.
On that then. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of waste. They're making so much money that they could afford to do that.
Now, Carlos's debauched lifestyle, I would imagine that will be shown in some detail in this series. I would think. For
Yeah,
how far
so
into it
far,
did they go?
I'm 2/3 of the way through. I'm through the first season.
Mm-hmm.
There's 15 episodes in the first season and 15 episodes in the second. And so far, he's been staying with one girl that he met early, and she's sort of his right hand man, which deviates away from the book because I don't really deal with that part on there. But we haven't really he hasn't really even touched Norman's Cay yet, and
Oh,
we're on the
okay.
10th
All right.
episode.
So you're early
Right.
into
So
it.
I'm thinking that's going to end before the first season ends on that. But the character is a little bit lovable, believe it or not. I mean, he's
Yeah.
sort of a rascal type character. He's not as nasty as Carlos could be, with his debauchery and all that. So it's kind of interesting the way they did that.
Yeah. What about the some of those shows? They've got a lot of torture scenes in them. They're always finding somebody that they need to tie to a chair and do stuff to. I get a little
Yeah,
tired
well,
of
they
that.
do that in there was a couple of scenes in the movie too where they tortured some prisoners for information
Yeah.
on that. But I think it's going to be a good series. I think it's a good series on that. I got a chance to meet the character or the actor that plays Carlos Lehder,
Uh-huh.
um, uh, uh, Sebastian Osario. He's a young kid. He's only like 24 years old. He's up
Mm-hmm.
and coming. He speaks perfect English. He went to school in the States, and I had a good conversation with him about the character. He was asking me like, how do I see him playing and all that, and very intelligent guy. And I asked him, I said, is this a career changing role? And he said, yeah. He said
Uh-huh.
it's a major role for him
Cool.
on that sort of thing. And the poster that you'll post is a picture of him in there.
Okay. Interesting. So I guess then you'll have a season two. Is that already in the works, or
Yeah,
are they
yeah,
committed to that?
right on
Okay.
that then. And I was in Colombia, and I was on the set, and I saw them filming season or episode 10, which I just saw, which is kind of interesting. And I got a chance to see how the film was being made, which is really quite interesting.
Yeah, it is. They do one little thing and cut, one little thing and cut, and then do it
Well, the
about
scene
five
that I
times
saw,
and cut.
the one scene I saw later, he had five buddies, and they were putting some cocaine into the trunk,
Yeah.
and they shot that scene 6 times, and there wasn't much dialogue in it. And finally, I turned to the director because I was sitting beside the director, and I said, why are you reshooting this scene? And he said that one of the characters was mispronouncing the word, which I didn't pick up, on that. I don't know what it
Yeah.
was, but that shows you how much they were into detail.
Boy, sounds like it'll be a good one.
Yeah.
Sounds really interesting. I really enjoyed Narcos. I got hooked on Narcos. Now,
Yeah.
so in your how do you deal with law enforcement in this? Are you going to deal with law enforcement at all,
Well, they do
other
have
than
yeah, they invented a couple of characters
okay?
that worked for the DEA, and they started off early with them tracking later. And so law enforcement is in there. I don't know if they're going to deal with the corruption or anything like that. They haven't dealt with any of the politics yet. There's been no
Mhm.
major political figures from Colombian history in there, and so it's quite interesting to see where the series is going to go.
Really, because on that extradition thing, no extradition, that became a huge political bundle of dynamite down there in Colombia. Dang near
Well,
brought the country down.
right later organized a party, the National Latin Party, to fight extradition.
Mm-hmm.
That was the major concern of the drug traffickers because they knew that if they were shipped to the United States, caught and shipped to the United States,
Yeah.
they wouldn't get a break. They couldn't bribe anybody. They would spend the rest of their lives in prison. And, they always said a jail cell in Colombia rather than a tomb in the United States, That's the
Yeah.
way they viewed it.
Yeah.
Right. And so he organized this party, and he was interested in politics. He even won a couple of seats in Parliament,
Hmm.
and it sort of fizzled out later. And later became the first really big drug trafficker to which the United States sought extradition of.
Oh, he was. I didn't realize that,
Yeah,
huh? He
yeah,
had
yeah.
high
Yeah,
profile.
right. When they killed Rodrigo Bonilla, who was a justice minister, that changed everything.
Mhm.
They went hard. The Colombian government was forced to go hard after the drug lords, especially the Medellin cartel, and they all fled to Panama and Noriega, where Noriega provided safe haven for them. And then they heard rumors that Noriega was planning a deal with the U.S. government uh, for leniency on potential drug trafficking charges if he would turn in the many cartel leaders. So they fled there and they went to Nicaragua,
Oh, really?
and they ended up in Nicaragua before they came back to Colombia when they thought it was safe enough on that.
So if I remember right, in Blow, that's also where George Jung, and they had turned him, and they had cameras in his plane, and I believe they picked up uh, Noriega maybe in the background on one of those
Yeah, right. They caught him.
transshipments.
Right. George became a minor character in the drug trade because later cut him out.
Oh, really?
Later decided he didn't need Jung, and that made George very bitter. I interviewed George twice,
Oh, did you?
and that made him bitter towards later,
Hmm.
and it comes out in the movie too. Blow.
Oh, yeah. I didn't remember that. Now he died recently, didn't he? In real life?
Yeah, he just
Yeah.
died a couple of years ago. Right. He was when I met him, he was on my Crime Beat radio show. He had just gotten out of prison, or not out of prison, and he was on probation. And it was kind of funny because he was on the show, and it was interrupted by his probation officer, who came in and gave him hell for not reporting or something like that, and he got in some kind of trouble. So it was kind of funny on that sort of thing. But he was in poor health when he was on the show, and it eventually deteriorated. And he was up there in age. He was in the late 70s,
Yeah.
and then he passed away.
It's kind of interesting. These guys are all like these iconic historical characters
Yeah,
in popular culture, at least for now. I don't know how long it'll last, but right now, you just
yeah,
start talking about this in popular culture, and people will know who you're talking about. But mainly because of
yeah,
the
exactly.
movies and your movie, you're gonna make Carlos Lehder a little more popular, a little more memorable
Yeah,
in this series, especially if it catches hold with
yeah,
very many people, that
exactly.
people will know who he
But
is.
yeah, if you look at the history of the United States, you look at the Western gangsters, right? Like Jesse
Oh, yeah.
James and
Oh, yeah.
Billy the Kid. Everybody
Yes.
knows who they are. You
Yeah.
look at Al Capone from the
Yes.
20s and know
Yep.
who they are. There's no reason to expect that 100 years from now, the people aren't going to forget Carlos Lehder and
Yeah.
Pablo Escobar.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I agree. They probably will. We like our
Yeah,
anti-heroes, and then if we
yeah,
can
exactly.
kind of like
We're fascinated by them.
right,
Yeah,
and we just need to like skew them a little bit where they weren't quite so bad. Don't tell me too many details about what they did.
yeah,
I
yeah.
know.
I was
I
looking on.
know Jesse James. His family lived here close to Kansas City in a small town called Kearney, right outside the town. And the
Right.
Pinkerton Detective Agency sent a guy in to work undercover, and he was last seen headed toward the James farm out of Kearney, Missouri, and he was never seen again. So,
Oh, is that right?
yeah, a little known story there. But
Yeah,
so you got to
yeah,
like kind of take some of that bad stuff out and make them into your anti-heroes.
yeah. I was looking on my TV. I was looking at the shows, and I was counting the number of crime shows there are.
Yeah.
They're like every four or so, almost half of the shows on TV are related to crime in some way.
Yeah. If it wasn't
Yeah.
for
So
cops
people are
and
fascinated
criminals.
by criminals.
I know. How many mob podcasts? When I started, I was the only one, and now I don't know how many there are. There must be
right.
10 or 15 of them, mobsters and other. There's no other policeman, FBI agent or two, and a lot of young guys are starting now. I'm getting calls from these young guys that are starting their own mob podcast and want me to be on their show or whatever. It's crazy. Let's see.
Exactly.
Let me think if I have any other questions. I guess in the end, I mean, you're not to the end in this show, but kind of to put a cap on Carlos Lehder, he ends up in Marion.
Yeah, the real story. Yeah, the real story of Carlos. He his life deteriorated. He got really sick, and he was saved by Escobar when he came back after fleeing to Nicaragua and all that. He came back to Colombia. He got really sick, almost died, and Escobar sort of saved him, nursed him back to life, and he made him a bodyguard. He went from a drug lord to a bodyguard on that sort of thing. But he was still unpredictable, leading a debauched existence and all that. And it was sort of an embarrassment to Escobar. And the story is circulates, and I think it's true, is that Escobar really set up Lehder for capture. He put him on a farm and then told the authorities where he was. And they caught him at an orgy pretty well, where he was partying.
What else?
With a bunch of pals, and they captured him. They whisked him out within the 6 or 7 hours. He was out of the country, on his way to the United States, and he ended up in Florida. And he was tried in Jacksonville in 1987. This is 1987, and everybody was worried. They had armed guards outside. They thought the cartels were going to try to free him, that sort of stuff, which was nonsense. They weren't going to do anything like that. But at that time, it was the biggest trial of a foreign gangster in American history. And he got life plus 135 years in jail. It was pretty foregone conclusion. He was convicted. And then in 1991, after Noriega, the United States sent troops into Panama and literally kidnapped Noriega and brought him back to trial, and later agreed to be testified against him. And he thought he was going to get a 30-year sentence, which would have made him eligible for parole, but he got a 55-year sentence, which meant that he was going to stay in prison indefinitely. And he fought this about 2005. He got his lawyer to challenge his sentence, saying that it was unfair, that he should have the reduced sentence because of what he did in testifying against Noriega. And finally, rumors start circulating about 2015 that he was getting out of prison. And I didn't really believe it. I thought he was going to be in there for probably die in there. But all of a sudden, in 2020, June 15th, he was shipped out from the United States. He had 2 American agents with him, and Germany agreed to take him because he had German citizenship. And that's where he is now. A charity evidently is supposed to be supporting his health. He was in very poor condition, very sick. That was the rumor. And there's a charity that's supposed to be taking care of him. And that's where he is. I tried to get, I have done a screenplay on Carlos Lehder, and I tried to get him involved with it. And we contacted Lehder's lawyer in Miami, and we sent him a bunch of stuff, but we never heard back from Carlos on that sort of thing. And the rumor is that he's coming out with a documentary latter part of this year on that.
Interesting. Well, he's one interesting guy. A little aside, I was doing a story on a guy who had been in Merriam Penitentiary, I guess at the same time Carlos was up there. And his name was Dominic Tadeo. He's from Rochester, New York. And he was on the lam, and they they came up with some plans he had made, and even like some guns, some money, and some things in a storage facility when he was finally captured and put back in. And he had this plan to break Carlos Lehder out of the penitentiary and then try to ransom him back to Colombian cocaine cartel people. Did you ever heard
Is that
one?
right?
Yeah.
Well, Lehder disappeared for a while in prison, and he was put in Witzig
Oh, really?
prison.
Yeah.
And he was really upset with the fact that they never gave him a reduced sentence, right? And he wrote a letter to the judge, and it was viewed as threatening. And so they took him out and put him in isolation and all that sort of stuff. And then he was out in Arizona in prison there. And then one day they just picked him up and shipped him out. And so he disappeared and nobody knew where he was. And so all these rumors started that he was working for the CIA, that he was out back in the business and all that sort of stuff. I even talked with a guy about it, that he had written several articles about Lehder, and all that. And I told him, I said, none of that's true. I said, that's all garbage on that sort of stuff. But he wouldn't believe me. And he has since died. But then Lehder showed up with that lawyer challenging the prison sentence given him in 2005. And so that put those rumors to circulation. But my argument was, what the hell would Lehder know about the drug trafficking today?
Really?
I mean, he was out of the business in '88.
Yeah.
And he would know nothing about what was going on today. So it was absurd to even think that he would be involved with something like that.
Yeah. Today, it appears to me that Colombians, they must still grow it, the beans and all that, and make it down there. But it seems like the Mexican cartels are the dominant force.
Yeah, this is what happened
smuggling.
after the Cali cartel was taken down in '95. The Colombians, drug traffickers, smartened up, and rather than become the distributors to the United States, they just sort of got the cocaine and handed it off to the Mexicans, and Shorty, and all these various drug traffickers that became big in Mexico and that sort of thing. But they're still active in the drug trade, and a lot of that cocaine is coming from coca grown in Colombia in the Andean region.
Interesting. Hey, Ron, you like cut out during that when you started into that. Could you just say that over again, and I'll take that out, about the time you started talking about how the Colombians got out of the transportation and but kept growing. Could you say that over again?
Right. Yeah. What happened was, after the Cali cartel was taken down, the Colombian drug lords got smart, and they decided they weren't going to be the main distributors, high profile distributors to the United States. So they worked with the Mexicans, and the Mexicans became the main people handling the drugs, which wasn't very smart law enforcement wise, because it just moved the drug trade closer to the border, and made the Mexicans much more on that. And but they're still active in the drug trade. I mean, they're still one of the major. Colombia is still one of the major producers of coca, from which cocaine is made, and it's thriving. The drug trade in Colombia, but it's not as violent as it was. There isn't the violence that's associated with that, like the late 1980s, when Escobar was on the run from law enforcement and launched this narco-terrorism campaign, which I saw. I was in my house one day when I heard a bomb go off, which was like maybe about a mile away. That's how big the bomb was. And when I was going to Colombia, I couldn't go 10 miles outside of Bogota because of the guerrillas. All that's changed now, and Medellin is even one of the top destinations for American retarees. Believe it or not, this is it's in fact, it's number one. ARP had Medellin number one. Which is astonishing.
It is.
Given that at one time, Escobar was paying money to sicarios to kill police officers. And they were being killed by the droves.
Well, that is astonishing that it's changed
Yeah.
that much. And I know the weather's great. You know, it's closer to the
Yeah, yeah.
equator,
Medellin
so
is
it's
a
warm,
big
and but it's
climate,
high in
right?
the mountains, and so the
Yeah,
weather's
yeah,
like land of eternal spring, Tierra de Primavera.
yeah, exactly. That sort of thing. One interesting note: the series starts off with Lehder in prison, old man, and the guy looks remarkably like Sebastian Sario, who plays the young Lehder, and he's in the prison, and they're telling him he's getting out, and he has a book on his lap, and it's my book.
That is good.
It's the book upon which is kind of funny. And then in the third scene, he's on the plane going to Germany, and you look on his lap, and there's my book again. So they gave me pretty good publicity on that.
They did. They did.
Yeah.
All right, Ron Chepesiuk and the story of Carlos Lehder. Ron, go back over the name of that and where people find it, and then tell us a little bit about a couple of your other books. I'll put links up to Ron's Amazon author page because he's been a pretty prolific author. And then I forgot last time we talked, I forgot about your radio show. That you were the first show that I was ever on after I did that movie Gangland Wire.
Yeah, right.
So,
I remember that.
So
Yeah,
talk a little bit about
yeah,
yourself there.
yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've come out with I've done 42 books, and the last two books I've done are Real Mr. Big, how a Colombian refugee became $1 billion drug lord in the United Kingdom, and then I did Bad Henry, murderous rampage of the Taco Bell Strangler, about a serial killer that killed 10 women from 1992 1994 in Charlotte. And I've done some other books, mainly on drug trafficking. I did a book on Frank Matthews called Black Caesar, which has been optioned for a movie, and Sergeant Smack, which is my favorite book because I had a really close relationship with Sergeant Smack, who was Ike Atkinson, on that sort of thing. And I'm working on a book now about a Dallas con man in the gas and oil industry, and I'm working on that right now. So I'm busy. Plus, I'm a screenwriter, so I'm working on scripts all the time.
So, what about your Crime Beat Radio? How do people find that?
Crime Beat Radio is interesting. You can find it at the artistfirst.com website, and look it up, and you'll see the link on Thursday evenings at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. The show is on, and I've been on the air since 2011, and I've had over 640 shows, something like that, on that. And I'm like you, I was there at the beginning.
You were.
And now there are like hundreds of crime shows.
Yeah, you predated me even by about 2 years.
Yeah, that sort of thing. But yeah, and I enjoy doing it. And I'll be on the show tomorrow talking about this. You're the first guy I'm talking about this.
Oh, okay. Oh,
this
cool.
Topic, the TV series, and I'll be on tomorrow to talk about my own show. So,
all right, great. Well, Ron, it's always a pleasure to talk to you and have you on the show. Don't forget, guys, I like to ride motorcycles, so watch out for motorcycles when you're out there on the street. And if you have a problem with PTSD and you have been in the military, go to the VA website and get that hotline number. If you have a problem with drugs or alcohol, go see our friend Angelo Ruggiano at angeloruggiano.com or on his YouTube channel. He is a former Gambino member, and he also now is in recovery himself, and he is a drug and alcohol counselor down in Florida. So I really appreciate you coming on the show, Ron. And you guys don't forget to like and subscribe and share this with your friends. Thanks a lot, Ron.
Thank you, Gary.